Let's tell you about the Labour Department and law enforcement agencies. They're raiding a liquor outlet in Roodepoort. It's alleged that the establishment is selling expired alcohol. Katleho Sekhotho is in Roodepoort for us to tell us more about this operation. What is illegal alcohol? Well, illegal or fake alcohol, Katleho?
Indeed, Dudu. We are here at the Ultra Liquors Express store at the Rock Cottage shopping complex. And indeed, police officials in a joint operation this morning, about an hour, 2 hours ago, descended on this establishment to determine where laws are being broken, and indeed the officials finding that hundreds of liquor here being sold is indeed expired. I want to show you here, Dudu, the number or the magnitude really of the product that have been identified as non-compliant and actually expired. And so the owner and the manager of this establishment being apprehended in terms of the Labour Department as well as SAPS to determine, first of all, because the owner is a Chinese gentleman, and to determine whether he has the correct documentation, he has a permit to be able to operate here, but also that the employees, some of which are foreign nationals, whether they have the correct documentation. And it seems that they may be wanting in that respect. But I want to bring in the advocate, the Provincial Chief Inspector from the Employment and Labour Department, just to give us more in terms of what happens here on. I mean, Advocate, let's talk about the employees first of all. Obviously, people who work here, who make a living. What have you found? What happens now?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's unfortunate that with regard to the employees that are very vulnerable and a reason for existence as the Department of Employment and Labour is that the employer does not have any documentation to show. So everything that we hear now is an allegation. Even their salaries, to say how much they are earning, it's an allegation, because we don't have a wage register, we don't have a pay slip, we don't have a contract of employment, and we have checked that there's no attendance register. And we also checked the employees against the database of the unemployment insurance that we hold in the Department of Employment and Labour, and they do not appear as being registered. We do not have their declarations, and there is no proof of payment that the employer is paying. And what worries more is that because they are not even having proof that they are registered with the compensation fund, it means that if an employee can be injured here, will have a challenge for covering that employee, because there is no proof of such, including the return of earnings that should be done annually by the employer. In essence, this employer does not comply to all our legislation.
Wow. And I heard that in terms of the employment of undocumented foreign nationals, what are the consequences for the owner or the manager of this establishment?
The consequences is that he will then be charged by the Department of Home Affairs for employing a foreign national without documentation, and that also contravenes our Employment Services Act in terms as the Department of Employment and Labour. But we'll leave it to Home Affairs now. But what is even said is that the employee himself that is employed is not even covered by any piece of legislation in terms of the documents of the employer. And it has been brought to our attention that the employer does not even have a copy of her passport. She was only employed based on the CV that she produced without any official document that would prove her identity. And that is worrying a lot, because we've got to protect even this employee in terms of being injured or in terms of being covered by our legislation, because it doesn't mean that if she came into the country illegally, she does not enjoy the protection of employment laws. She does enjoy the protection, but it's unfortunate that if you've got such an employer who does not comply at all, then you will have consequences and repercussions that are not going to be favorable to the employees.
Certainly. Advocate, in terms of the South African Revenue Service being here, SARS, what happens now in terms of this product that you've identified, non-compliant? Where does SARS come in and intervene?
Well, we have two options. The first option that we had was to request us to say it must take custody of the place because we are going to prohibit the place in terms of occupational health and safety laws. I've said it in the beginning that they did not conduct any risk assessment, which would have established that a lot of their staff has expired. And secondly, they did not have the certificate of compliance in terms of electrical installation. Neither do they have a certificate of conformity in terms of gas installations. And even the employees do not have PPEs. So we are going to prohibit. So SARS would either have taken custody of the place, but the alternative that we have now is that we have invited the liquor board to come and check so that it can check if even the liquor that is sold here is not counterfeit. And once they establish that, they will then give a way forward to say what is it that should happen. But on our side, we'll prohibit the place and order that the employer can only trade if all the issues that we have raised have been attended to.
Yes, and just a very last one, Advocate, in terms of the customer who's a regular here, what is your message to that person who usually buys their product here?
Yeah, it is very unfortunate because a customer should also be protected. And the customer is protected in terms of also our laws. Our laws do not only protect employees, they protect even persons that are connected to the business. So if a customer comes here and he sees then on TV that the liquor that is sold here is actually expired, he must be very careful not to buy at such places, or to make sure that when he buys, he checks the expiry date so that he should not fall victim of such unscrupulous liquor sellers.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time, Advocate. You heard it there from the Provincial Chief Inspector, the Advocate, they're explaining, also sending a message to customers to make sure that you check the expiry date of the alcohol that you buy, or any store where you buy a product, just check that it is in compliance there. So really that's the situation here. The SARS, the Advocate explaining there, SARS has to take over from here, but really the goods here behind me are going to be confiscated.
Katleho, Sekhotho, is this just but the first stop? Are there a number of shops that will also be raided?
Certainly the sense we're getting from the department, working with a number of law enforcement officials, keen to especially ramp up operations during the festive season. As you know, so many people will be in a relaxed mood, in a leisure mood, and will be coming to a different number of outlets and buying different products. But saying there that just be careful, especially during this time. But certainly we do get a sense from officials that they'll be ramping up operations, especially during this time.
The owner of the shop and the employees, are they still on site?
They certainly are on site, and they are being, addressed by a number of officials. As you can see there, they are, standing near the counter area. The people who worked here on a regular basis being questioned as to, first of all, those who are employed here, whether if they are foreign nationals, whether they have the correct documentation. But the owner of the place, being a Chinese gentleman, we were told that he does in fact have a permit, but they will be taking his documents to check that to verify that everything is in the correct order. But a lot of consequences in terms of the owner employing a foreign national who doesn't have the correct documentation and possibly being charged.
Katleho, Sekhotho, is it possible to also find out how it is that he was able to, because that looks like a very well-stocked, well-put-together, well-run place that you are at, and what do we know maybe about how he was allowed, this Chinese gentleman, to actually be able to, is he renting, does he own that space, what more do we know?
So certainly some of those details we're still to understand in terms of how long he's been operating and why he's been able to, have a, liquor that is expired for so long. And what we know is that, the police received a tip-off. And it'll be interesting to know in terms of that tip-off, was it perhaps a frustrated customer? Was there any reports of injuries or people being sick or anything like that? But those details haven't been revealed yet in terms of the extent of the consequences of the selling of illegal alcohol. But certainly that tip-off is what gave the police the means to come here.
Katleho, Sekhotho, thank you very much for that comprehensive report.